a scrunchie, and you will need just a scrap piece of fabric. If it's wrinkled, go ahead and get it ironed up. This one, yeah, looks like we may be able to use this edge. I like to be as frugal as possible with the fabric. And since this is a scrunchie and we're not fitting it part of our body, it doesn't have to be exactly as straight as possible, even though you want it to be straight when you're cutting out your garments. For this purpose, we are just trying to sew a straight line. I'm just going to mark. I'm going to attempt to mark my pattern here. And this pattern is 21 by 3 if you are making your own pattern. So pattern is 21 inches. Now that we have traced it, just going to cut this out. Remember to keep your scissors flat on the table. Don't pick it up like this. We can't cut straight when it is picked up. So lay your hand on here. The flatter you can keep it, the straighter your cut or seam is going to be. So we'll fold up our excess and cut the pattern, and now we are ready to pin it together. So you always want to pin right sides together. Since this is batik and dyed, both sides look the exact same, but if you had a fabric that had a right and a wrong side, like this, so this would be your right side here, wrong side. Obviously, you're going to want to put your right sides together, and then the first thing we're going to do is pin about 2 inches from each end. And if you're not sure how long that is, you can just kind of measure it with your finger, just the depth of your finger there. Or you can use a seam gauge, put it on 2, measure. Obviously mine's just a little bit more, but it doesn't really matter for this. You just want to leave an opening so that when you turn it, it's easier to sew those right sides together. Alright, so we're going to start there. I'll go back to mine and pin the right sides together. This is for our the seams and seam finishes proficiency scale, sewing a 15-inch seam and finishing it, so we will be serging the edge. Now, I've pinned it on the ends, so I'm just going to go down, put a couple more pins, because this is cotton, we don't really have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about putting a lot of pins in it. Okay, now this is what it looks like. We're going to take it over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew from here to here. So you're sewing in between the pins. Alright, so we're going to start right here, sewing at 3/8 inch seam allowance. So we'll just line up the edge of the fabric here with our 3/8 inch. Needle down in your fabric first, take your pin out, press your foot down. Make sure that you guys are sewing at a regular stitch length, which is 3 on our machine. Sew a couple stitches, back stitch, go all the way down. And when I sew, I like to just keep my eyeball right here on this edge so that I know that I have it lined up, and I'm going to sew a straight line. If you're a beginning sewer or sewist, don't stress out about going too fast. It's okay. You're going to back stitch at the end. And before we turn it using our loop turner, I am going to take it over to the serger and just serge off this edge. Alright, so obviously we want to keep this open. So what I'm going to do is just bring it in here and lift up the presser foot, because this is a school and I do not allow the students to lift the presser foot. You're just going to stick it underneath here and start serging. If you're doing this at home, you're going to lift up your presser foot and go ahead and start here, leaving the ends open. And then you're just going to serge this edge. When you're serging, you're lining up the edge of your knife with the edge of your fabric there. And then when we get to the end, we're just going to chain off here, leaving that opening. Okay, so we have our serged edge, which also goes with the seams proficiency scale. I think I need to work on the tension on this serger, but you can see the ends are open here on both ends like this. And then we have a seam finish to fulfill that section. And then we're going to use our loop turner to turn it. So what we're going to do, we're going to use our loop turner and we're just going to fish it through the scrunchie here. And this little thing on the end of it is to help hold it in place. It is a bit challenging to get it to go through the fabric. You have to just poke it in there. So poke that through like this so it catches. And then you'll just stick the end of your fabric underneath the hook here so it all just kind of hooks together. And that keeps it from coming out as you're pulling your case or your scrunchie or your belt loops through. So we're going to hook it on the screw for the needle, and that gives it a little bit of tension. And then you're just going to start pulling from down here on the sides and working your way as you have the needle clamp, giving it tension and a little bit of resist so that you can pull it and turn your loop, belt loop, or for this case the scrunchie, to the inside. Works amazing. Now we're going to take it over to the ironing board and we're going to press it so that the seam is nice and flat here, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, so now that we're at the ironing board, we're going to just try to get this seam as flat as possible. Go ahead and tuck in your seam allowances right there and press it on the edge of the seam as close as you can get it, all the way down. And now that we have it pressed, you're going to pick it up, put your ends together so that it's nice and straight, and then open both sides like this so that you're pinning right here in the middle with your right sides touching. Let me show you that again. Everything is together, and then we're just going to come in here, put the centers together, and pin those first. Always pin when you're just sewing two seams together and not really trying to control something like a pocket or a waistband casing where you're sewing in a specific direction. You always pin perpendicular to your stitch line here. Now, some of you may prefer to pin parallel to the stitch line with this, but for teaching purposes, we need to keep it perpendicular. Okay, now we're going to take it over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance from here to here. Okay, so we're just going to sew up the edge here, putting it on a 3/8 inch seam allowance, starting about a 1/4 inch from the end. Go ahead and roll your needle down in your fabric back stitch to the edge, and always keep your eye right here on your seam allowance, your needle plate. That'll make a straight stitch line every single time. You do kind of have to pull this out to work with it a little bit. I also use this method when I'm doing alterations on sleeves or shoulders. Now, back stitch and trim the threads. And then this part here, you're just going to do a little finger press. There's no need really to take it back to the ironing board, even though I am a big advocate for ironing your seams. With garments, you would want to iron every seam, but this one, you can just do a little finger press in here, pop it to the inside, like this. And then we're going to get, if you have really thick hair, you want to do 8-inch elastic. If not so thick, you can just do 7 inches. Or a good rule of thumb is to measure your wrist and cut your elastic to that length. So we're going to use 1/4-inch elastic. I would not use any larger than 3/8-inch elastic. And knit elastic seems to work better for this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my elastic and I'll be right back. I don't have very much here, so I'm just going to use our design ruler and measure 7 inches here for the elastic. If you have really thick hair, you could go ahead and do 8 inches. Or as I said, if I just wrap it around my wrist and measure that distance, a lot of times that is 7 inches. So, which is about 6.5. Could always add just a little bit if your wrists are smaller. And get that little snip. To thread it through, we're going to use a safety pin. Yes, a bodkin is the correct tool to use, but I feel like sometimes the bodkin gets lost in there. So we're just going to use a safety pin, and I always like to go towards my right hand or clockwise. So just going to push this in. So I do the push, push, pull method. So push, push, pull. And when you get here, so your elastic is about to go through, pin your elastic to the inside so you don't lose it. And then just keep pushing the elastic around onto the safety pin and giving it a pull. For those of you that are not a student and you're watching this, I apologize for the noises in the background. I do record this at school as a teaching video. So, now that we're back over here, you want to just kind of feel it. Just like when you're making a casing, you don't want that elastic to be twisted. Just feel it and make sure that your elastic is not twisted. And then go ahead, remove your pin. And for waistband elastic, I like to lap it over or either butt it up and do a zigzag. But for this, it's a little bit more tricky. So we're just going to put the ends together. Place a pin here for our holder. Stick it underneath the sewing machine. Go ahead and roll your needle down into it. And then pull the pin out. This, you could use a reinforced stitch, which is a 1.5 if you wanted to. Keep it in there. Back stitch over it. Go forward. So you're going to sew over it 2 or 3 times with that reinforced stitch just to keep it in there nice and tight so it doesn't break. And then the last thing that we're going to do, go back up to our regular stitch, and we're going to close it off. So we're just going to top stitch around the edge. For this project in class, you guys can just do the opening, but I'm going to go all the way around to give it a little decorative touch. So because I'm sewing all the way around, I'm not going to back stitch here, but if you guys are just closing up the opening, you need to make sure you back stitch. So we're going to sew 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I am just lining up the edge of my scrunchie here with the inside edge of my foot, and you do kind of have to pull it out as you sew so that it's not wrinkled. And you can take advantage of your sewing machine here, the sewing machine arm, let it stretch it for you just by wrapping it under. Once you get back, you back stitch, and now you have an adorable scrunchie that you can gift or start your own business making scrunchies. Beautiful.